Russia's pushing Finland and Sweden toward NATO. This is a Bloomberg story. Last month, the Russian foreign ministry made comments about Finland and Sweden, indicating displeasure with the idea of either joining the alliance, but this approach may well have backfired on the Russians and increased the desire of both Nordic nations to seriously consider membership. It represents an opportunity for NATO, given the character, geography, and military capability of the two countries. Technologically, both nations operate high-end combat equipment, notably the Swedish Air Force, which flies locally produced Saab Gripen strike fighters. These were used to excellent military effect in the combat operations in Libya in 2011. Under my command, Finland just ordered 64 Lockheed Martin F-35 fighters, the most advanced combat aircraft in the world. And then I'll read the story prior to that,
before that,
which goes with it about Blinken. This is a real clear politics story. If Russia attacks Ukraine, NATO will reinforce the Baltic states and Poland. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said that negotiation with Russia over Ukraine continue and warned if Russia commits renewed aggression against Ukraine, I think it's a very fair prospect that NATO will reinforce its positions along the eastern flank, the countries that border Russia. Poland and the Baltic republics of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia are the only members of NATO directly bordering Russia. How we got here is because Russia's committed repeated acts of aggression against its neighbors going back more than a decade, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine in 2014, and now the prospect of doing that again, Blinken said. Do you think Russia or Putin listens to Blinken and says, oh my gosh, that just scared me? Do you think that's what Putin says when he hears Blinken speak?
I don't think so, no. I mean, I think words are useless and your actions are the only thing that matter. And they look at Afghanistan and they go, really? We've heard you talk before, Blinken. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I don't think so. Again, you just look at what they do during one administration versus the next. Yeah, right. I mean, I think you focus on what people do, what they as opposed to what they say. Lots of talk. I'm never concerned about what I see Russia doing. I'm always concerned about what I don't see them doing. Why they're creating a distraction in one place and what are they doing somewhere else. Granted, I mean, they produce some of the greatest chess players in the world. Yeah. Thinking through the strategy like long term.
Proxy, nonstop.
Well, that was my
all his game.
Mm-hmm. That was my third question.
Because that's what he did with Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's a nonstop proxy.
Look what just happened with Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
I mean, very interesting. The underreported color revolution in Kazakhstan. Like they overthrew their entire government overnight. They arrested them, but there's something that was reported that was denied immediately before anybody knew it was reported, which made it very, very suspect about the bioweapons load that apparently Russia had stolen bioweapons from an American facility in Kazakhstan, and it was denied before it was reported, which was very, very, very strange. It came out in the Daily Mail. It was never even reported in America. So, you know, like you talk about these proxy wars and you know, these coordinated, you know, efforts by these autocrats, and you say, man, we're running out of proxies. We're running out of these border countries to have these color revolutions, and like eventually the borders are going to meet each other, and you're not going to be able to push anymore. I mean, look, America's in a color revolution right now. You can disagree about it, call it a conspiracy all you want. Look at the definition of a color revolution. You think anything that happened over the last 3 years came from inside our borders, or do you think there were people inside our borders that were working with international factions? We talk about this all the time.
How higher up? I mean,
as high as it goes. You have global interests versus local interests now, Pat. I think we've talked about this at length. We don't have a lot of time to go into it, unfortunately. But you have people in our country who are not elected officials, and I think that this is what's happened to our government. Why we're so vulnerable right now, like you were saying, is because look, whatever the administration was, we always had the Senate, we always had Congress. Right, they always had their constituents in mind. For lack of a better term, they were the voice of the people. And then whoever our leader was, right, left, whatever, it was a small variance. Not a lot of difference. It really, when you think about it, not a ton of difference between Reagan, Bush 1, Clinton. Not a ton of difference. A little bit here, a little bit there, little spending this way, little spending that way, but mostly the same type of person, politically anyway, right?
40-yard lines.
40-yard lines, perfect example, right? Mm-hmm. Now we have these massive swings entire party-wide. You have a Senate that can't function unless it has a clear majority, right? So now everything is a national and a global issue. There is no local issues anymore. And our leaders who are elected by us are not beholden to us. they're beholden to global interests. There's nothing that nobody can convince me differently. And it's not just Nancy Pelosi. Mitch McConnell the same way. They're more interested in what China and the EU and the UN have to say than they are their district in San Francisco or Virginia. And you can't convince me otherwise. And that's a major problem. That's a huge issue.
How higher up, though? How higher up? You think even presidents are playing on other, different interests where they're worried about
The big guy getting deals in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean,
look, again, this goes
And
back
15 points for the big guy.
15 points for the big guy.
But this right here, man. First of all, one thing about Putin. So Putin, this is not a guy that when he threatens, he's just threatening. You go to a bar, a guy says, if you do that again, I'm going to punch you in the face. 9 out of 10 times it's what? The guy's just talking shit.
Just talking.
1 out of 10 times it's Putin. He's not even gonna tell you. He's just gonna punch you in the face.
He's not the
right?
guy that punches anymore.
Yeah,
He snaps his
exactly.
finger
But
and somebody
the
else
point
punches.
is-
So
that is-
somehow your drink gets poisoned. Exactly.
that is
No,
a-
he's
Look at
just-
Navalny on a flight.
Radiated salad.
He's going to give you the polonium hairspray as he walks past you. and
What
let you
is
die in a hospital?
So look, let's end on a message of hope though, Pat. Man, like, all right. So what?
By the way, we just got word. We got a few more minutes because I got to go to the airport at 11:30. So we got time.
Oh,
Keep
cool.
going. Yeah.
So, who is the you working for America? Like you're doing God's work, working for the most vulnerable amongst us. Tom made a great point before. In my limited government worldview, government. I'm not an anarchist. Government has a place. It's to protect the most vulnerable amongst us. And if our government, with $9 trillion at its disposal over the last 3 years, can't protect or is unwilling to protect the most vulnerable, why should it exist? If it doesn't function at its baseline of upholding the Constitution of the United States and protecting the most vulnerable among us, why should it exist? And why should we be giving them any more money? God, AOC, I know you're sick. I hope this doesn't upset you while you're sick and watching. But why should we give these people even $1 more if they can't even do that now? And what if they're not doing that? If they're not looking out for American citizens, and if they're not looking out for the most vulnerable among us, if it falls on private sector to do it, then what are they doing with the money?
Oh, I can tell you what they're doing with the money, but I'd probably get myself in a lot of trouble.
They're spending a lot of it on defense. They're spending a lot of it on Social Security. Spending
we-
a lot on Medicare. A lot
we
on
spend-
Medicaid.
What does
a
that
lot
even
of,
mean?
hang on, I know where he's going.
We
Go.
spend less than 4% of the GDP on defense. But we actually need to increase that number to.
Well, what percentage
to
is Social
4%.
Security, Medicare,
That-
Medicaid?
that's where we
That's
get
where
it.
90% of it
It's
goes, bro.
liabilities, but I
It's-
think he's also going to go.
It's the
I'd like-
entitlements.
correct.
It's the entitlements and the waste. Here's a great example. Afghanistan's a black eye on our country. I think pretty much everybody agrees with that, regardless of where you are politically.
The
And
exit.
That falls.
You're saying the sloppy
should've
exit.
never been
No,
there to
the
begin with, man.
sloppy execution starting at Reagan. I mean, you look at the whole history of it, goes all the way back to Reagan.
Charlie Wilson's war.
Back to Charlie Wilson's
Great.
war. I mean, everyone's got culpability in it.
We freed the people, but we effed up the end game.
Who lost their job over that? Where's the accountability, right? You were working for Pat. Pat would have sent you packing. He would help you go, excel elsewhere. But it's not going to be in one of his companies if you screw up that bad, is my guess, right? Because there's accountability. Where is the accountability, right? You look at the way
This
that
is the ARC thing. You said
Nick,
accountability.
This is the system's
responsibility.
failing because it's supposed to be us.
And there's my point. So the Russians have the Internet Research, the IRA, the Internet Research Agency, right, which is basically a huge troll farm. So they, how are they going to hit us? I think was your question a while ago. They're going to use our liberties against us. They're just going to feed the right people, get them into the right echo chamber, and then radicalize them. It's
called college.
Because that's what they do. Yeah, right. The Russians and the communists talk about
Chinese.
taking over academia. I mean, there's plenty of YouTube videos about this from Communist Party meetings. And so when we look at this, I would actually say we as the people are the us. So you want a deliver fund doing counter-human trafficking work. You don't want the government doing counter-human trafficking work for this very reason, right? You want them arresting people because no private citizen should have the ability to restrict the liberty of another private citizen.
Yep.
That's what you need the government for. But where does that actual work
monopoly
come from?
on violence?
We talk about the military-industrial complex. Guess what? There's a reason Russia doesn't have F-35s. because they don't have a DynCorp or Northrop Grumman that has a capitalist incentive in order to make a better and better weapon. So we need those things. But at the same time, we as a people need to keep that in check and say, all right, let's regulate tech so that we can keep these foreign actors out. Nobody wants that more than the tech companies. Let's incentivize them to make sure that they have safe harbor and they have a reason, a business case to regulate themselves, right? To self-regulate, the same way that banks do with anti-money laundering laws, right? You look at the way that the banking system, I think, is actually the best one, right? With the banking system and the way that anti-money laundering laws work is a really, really good model for countering foreign actors.
Let me
right?
let me give you some pushback on that though, because tech isn't. Tech, even though they may be American companies, they're very clearly, Alphabet in particular, very, very clearly beholden to foreign interests.
But that's why we need to regulate them, because DynCorp.
Who's regulating them? So one, you said the government shouldn't regulate them, which I agree. But then when they self-regulate, look at what they're doing now.
The government.
They've demonetized people who have been proven to tell the truth. Me among them. They've taken down pages. They've taken down posts. Pat just had an interview that was taken down.
I know.
For what? For what reason? So that's they're regulating right now. They're self-regulating right now, but that's not. They're censoring.
I say the government needs to regulate them. And by the government, I mean we, the people, need to regulate them by telling our politicians what regulations we want.
I mean, I hate to make a slippery slope argument, but I mean, I just read Tyler. See if you can pull it up. There's a guy who's been #2 of the FBI for 16 years, and he said that conservatives should be put in re-education camps. That there needs to be surveillance on anybody who's donated to a right-wing candidate in America. This is the #2
Sure.
at the FBI.
And
that's who's going to regulate.
And at the same time, do you know where the 2%er community came from on the far right? Came from military, predominantly within the special operations community. So we got to keep in mind that within the government, it's the government, the people who work in the government are of the people. Right, so within a military,
but I mean, you would know better. But yes, no, 99% of the people working in the CIA are Ivy Leaguers now.
That's not.
Is that of the people?
No,
that's actually not true.
That is not true at all. Most of the people that was the case in the 50s. Most of the people at the CIA want you to believe they're an Ivy Leaguer, and I say this as an Ivy Leaguer who worked at the CIA. I was a very conservative guy. I'm a Christian conservative guy, pretty easy to figure out where I stand politically, and yet I was country chief for a kinetic unit within the CIA, within a classified unit. So, point is, like, how did I raise to such a high level so quick? The political ideology and a lot of the conspiracy theories that you hear about that internally, like, just doesn't get taken into account. I know folks at the FBI who are about as far right as you can get. I also know folks who are about as far left as you can get.
I don't want
Same
guys
thing.
to be right or left, Nick. I'm just saying, what was the last president we had didn't go to an Ivy League school? What was the last vice president we had didn't go to an Ivy League school? What was the last secretary of state we had didn't go to an Ivy League school?
But that's a whole other conversation, because at the end of the day,
it's just not of the people, though.
But the people who make the government run are of the people. I mean, they very much are. The soldiers on the ground in Afghanistan are not conservative. You would actually find the major majority of your soldiers on the ground, especially within the conventional ranks, are actually, you would probably consider them pretty liberal.
I would imagine so, because most of them are going to come from economically challenged areas.
That's not true.
Is it not true?
No, that is not true. That is total myth. In fact, when you look at the military writ large, and I don't know if this was your experience, it's predominantly middle class. It's predominantly middle class.
What would you describe as middle class? How wide of a berth are you giving that?
I mean, I would say, dad is usually blue collar, making somewhere, I mean, in my days, so that was the 90s, 50 to 100 a year.
Because if you're making 100K in Iowa, you're crushing it. You're making 100K in Jersey, you're barely getting
right. But about 80% of the military most of the military actually comes from rural America, and rural America is about 80% of the population or at least the land area of America.
You're saying it's not the bottom 20%, it's the
not
top
the bottom
20%. It's middle class. Got it.
Not at all. A lot of college educated. People who, and the reason this is an important part of the conversation is there's this myth that people join the military because they have no other option. I had tons of options. I had an appointment to the Air Force Academy, and I chose to be an enlisted guy because that's the job I wanted to do. I wanted to give back, and I wanted to serve, right? Pat had plenty of options, right? But you
I didn't have a lot of options. Nope.
Okay.
I had a 1.8 GPA in high school, so I'm more from the story that he's talking. I was low income, welfare baby that I joined the military. But when I was in, and I'm thinking about it, it was a lot of middle income families that joined. It was middle and low. I can't give you a lot of folks who were from, great families. And if they were not great families, money-making families, and if they were, they went straight into being officers. It wasn't enlisted. For you to become an enlisted, you made a choice. Guys like you would have never been enlisted. A lot of guys like you, when I remember that, they went straight to becoming second lieutenants day one, first lieutenants, captain. That's the route they took, at least when I was at that unit.
I think a lot of and I ran into this at the CIA too, there were a lot of folks from very wealthy families who were very quiet about the fact that they were from very wealthy families, right? And they
I think there's a minority group there. I don't disagree that that is a minority. I don't know if that's a majority.
So if you enjoyed this little short segment from the podcast that we did, here's another short segment to watch. Or if you want to see the entire podcast, click over here. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.